Picture this: a crowded airport, a young girl's dreams stuffed in a colorful backpack, and a flight attendant's shocking act of cruelty that's about to unravel everything. Buckle up, Dark Stories fans, because this tale of prejudice and instant karma will leave you speechless. Figure someone like you wouldn't follow the rules. The flight attendant sneered as she grabbed a black teenage girl's backpack, only to toss it in the trash in front of stunned passengers. No warning, no explanation, just hate disguised as authority. But what this smug employee didn't know: that girl was the daughter of the airline CEO. And the moment she reached for her phone, careers were about to end. Hold on to your seats, Dark Stories crew, because what started as humiliation spirals into a public reckoning no one saw coming. This story takes off fast, and karma hits even faster. The polished floors of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, ATL, gleamed under bright fluorescent lights. It was the height of the summer travel season, a chaotic ballet of hurried passengers, rolling suitcases, and echoing announcements. Among them was 15-year-old Amani Washington, a bright, confident young woman with a sketchbook full of dreams and a heart full of excitement. She was on her way to a prestigious summer art program in New York City, a trip she'd been looking forward to for months. Amani wasn't your average teenager, though she tried to blend in. Her father, Marcus Washington, was the recently appointed CEO of Ascend Air, one of the nation's largest airlines. This fact she rarely disclosed. She preferred to navigate the world on her own merits, without the colossal shadow of her father's influence. Today, she was flying Ascend Air, not out of familial obligation, but because it was the most convenient route. Her carry-on bag, a vibrant canvas backpack adorned with her own painted designs and quirky keychains, held her most precious belongings: her new tablet, advanced sketching pencils, a cherished art book gifted by her late grandmother, and a small, worn teddy bear named Gus, a secret companion on all her adventures. It fit perfectly within the airline's specified dimensions, a fact she'd meticulously checked. As she approached Gate B32, she noticed the Ascend Air flight attendants preparing for boarding. One had a warm, welcoming smile, the other, whose name tag read Susan, had a distinctly sour expression that deepened whenever a person of color walked by. Susan, with her blonde hair in a severe bun and eyes the color of pale, washed-out denim, scanned the queue with preemptive disapproval. Amani, ever observant, felt a familiar prickle of unease. She'd encountered people like Susan before, individuals who carried a cloud of unwarranted resentment. She clutched her backpack strap tighter, reminding herself to be polite, to be unremarkable, to just get to her seat and lose herself in her art. Boarding began with calls for premium passengers and those needing extra assistance. Amani waited patiently for her zone. Susan, positioned at the jet bridge entrance, had a sharp, clipped voice as she inspected boarding passes and carry-ons. Amani saw her stop an elderly Hispanic woman, making her struggle to fit a clearly compliant bag into the sizer, her tone unnecessarily harsh. Then, she waved through a white man with a visibly oversized duffel bag with a cursory nod. The prickle of unease intensified into a knot in Amani's stomach. When Amani's zone was called, she approached Susan, offering a polite, "Good morning." Susan didn't return the greeting. Her eyes flicked from Amani's face to her colorful backpack, and a sneer tugged at her lips. "That bag looks too big," she stated, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Oh, I checked the dimensions online, and it's fine," Amani replied calmly, though her heart beat faster. "It fits the sizer." "We'll be the judge of that," Susan snapped, gesturing imperiously toward the metal bag sizer. "Put it in." Amani had seen Susan let others pass with larger bags, but she didn't argue. She walked to the sizer, and with a gentle push, her backpack slid perfectly into the compartment, an exact fit, snug but clearly compliant. "See," Amani said, trying to keep the relief out of her voice. Susan's eyes narrowed. It was clear she hadn't expected it to fit, and the fact that it did seemed to incense her further. Her gaze fell on one of Amani's keychains, a small beaded lizard Amani had made herself. "Trinkets look untidy," Susan muttered, then louder, "Take it out. We need to keep things moving." Amani carefully retrieved her bag, her cheeks flushing under the scrutiny. She felt the eyes of other passengers, a mix of pity and impatience. She just wanted this over. As Amani stepped onto the jet bridge, believing the ordeal was done, Susan followed a step behind. The other flight attendant, Maria, with kind eyes and a name tag, offered Amani a sympathetic glance from further down near the aircraft door. "You know," Susan began, her voice dripping with venom Amani couldn't comprehend, "people like you always try to get away with things, thinking the rules don't apply." Amani stopped and turned, her brow furrowing. "Excuse me? People like me?" Susan's lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, you know exactly what I mean. Always wanting special treatment, always so loud." She gestured at Amani's backpack. "That bag's an eyesore anyway, full of who knows what." Amani was stunned into silence. The casual cruelty, the blatant prejudice, hit like a physical blow. Her mind raced. This wasn't about a bag anymore. This was about her race. "My bag is compliant, and what's inside is none of your business," Amani said, her voice trembling but firm. "I'm just trying to get to my seat." "Not with that attitude, you're not," Susan said, stepping closer, invading Amani's space. The jet bridge was nearly empty now, save for a few stragglers and Maria, who looked back with visible concern. Then, the unthinkable happened. With a sudden, vicious movement, Susan snatched the backpack from Amani's shoulder. The strap scraped her arm. "Hey!" Amani cried, reaching for it. "This is what I think of your art and your entitlement," Susan spat. Before Amani could react, Susan turned to a large, industrial-sized trash bin near the jet bridge wall, meant for last-minute disposals like water bottles. With a grunt of effort and a look of profound malice, she shoved Amani's backpack into the bin, among discarded coffee cups and crumpled wrappers. "No!" Amani screamed, lunging forward. The sound of her art book's spine cracking, the muffled thud as her tablet hit the bottom, echoed in the confined space. Gus, her little bear, was in there. Her pencils, her lifeline. Susan stepped back, a triumphant, ugly sneer on her face. Problem solved. Now get on the plane before you cause more trouble. Tears welled in Amani's eyes, tears of shock, rage, disbelief. Her hands shook. She looked at the trash bin, then at Susan, who stood there, arms crossed, daring her to challenge her. Other passengers peeked back, their faces etched with surprise and concern. Maria, the other flight attendant, rushed forward. "Susan, what did you do? You can't do that." "I handled it, Maria." "Stay out of it," Susan snapped, her voice like ice. She was being disruptive with an oversized, inappropriate bag. It fit the sizer. "I saw it," Maria protested, looking at Amani with deep empathy. "That's her personal property." Amani felt a cold fury burn through the shock. She locked eyes with Susan's smug face. "You have no right," she choked out, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I have every right," Susan retorted coolly. "I'm in charge of safety and order on this aircraft, and frankly, your kind needs to learn a lesson about respecting rules and authority." The thinly veiled racism was now starkly, horrifyingly clear. It wasn't just about a bag or alleged disruption. It was about Amani being black. Maria bent toward the trash bin. "Let me get it out for you, honey," she said softly to Amani. "Don't you dare, Maria," Susan commanded. "It stays there. It's refuse now." Amani felt something snap inside her. The shock gave way to steely resolve. She wasn't just some teenager Susan could bully. She was Amani Washington, and Susan had made the biggest mistake of her career. Wiping her eyes furiously, Amani reached into her pocket, her fingers closing around her phone. Her hands trembled, but her gaze was unwavering. She looked at Susan, whose smug expression faltered slightly at the change in Amani's demeanor. "You're going to regret this," Amani said, her voice low and steady. "You're going to regret this more than anything you've ever done." Susan scoffed. "Oh, I'm terrified." "What are you going to do, little girl? Call your mommy?" Amani didn't answer. Her thumb scrolled through her contacts. She found the name, Dad. Her finger hovered over her father's name. For a split second, she hesitated. Her father was a busy man, leading a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He'd taught her to handle her own battles, to be resilient, to use her voice. But this was different. This was malicious, targeted racism and abuse of power. This was something her father, the CEO of this airline, needed to know about immediately. She pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. Amani could feel Susan's dismissive gaze, Maria's worried eyes. A few passengers lingered at the aircraft door, whispering, their curiosity piqued. The jet bridge felt like a pressure cooker. Amani, honey, is everything okay? Marcus Washington's deep, calm voice came through the speaker. He was in back-to-back board meetings, but he'd told his assistant to always put Amani's calls through. Tears threatened again, but Amani fought them back. She needed to be clear, concise. Dad, she began, her voice shaky but gaining strength, I'm at gate B32 at ATL. I'm flying Ascend Air to New York, flight 712. Okay, Marcus said, concern entering his tone. He knew her travel schedule. For her to call just before boarding meant something was wrong. What's happened? A flight attendant, her name is Susan. Amani took a deep breath, glancing at Susan, who watched with annoyance and dawning apprehension. She just threw my backpack into a trash can on the jet bridge. She did what? The calmness in Marcus' voice was replaced by sharp, incredulous anger. Amani could almost hear him sitting bolt upright in his chair miles away at Ascend Air headquarters. She said my bag was an eyesore and that people like me always try to break the rules. She said I needed to learn a lesson. Amani's voice cracked, the humiliation and hurt bubbling up. My tablet, Dad. My art book from Grandma. Everything. A heavy silence followed. Amani pictured her father, his face darkening, processing the implications. This wasn't just a customer service issue. This was an attack on his child, fueled by racism, committed by his own employee on his own airline. Amani, Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet, a tone reserved for moments of extreme displeasure or crisis. Is this flight attendant Susan there with you now? Yes, Dad. She's right here. She won't let the other flight attendant, Maria, get my bag out of the trash. Susan, hearing her name mentioned with Dad, let out a nervous laugh. Oh, please. Is your daddy going to come scold me? But her bravado was cracking. Her face paled, her eyes darting between Amani and the phone. Put me on speaker, Amani, Marcus commanded. Amani fumbled slightly, her hands still shaking, and activated the speaker. You're on speaker, Dad. Marcus Washington's voice, amplified by the phone, filled the tense silence of the jet bridge. It was a voice accustomed to commanding attention, conveying power effortlessly. This is Marcus Washington, he stated, leaving no doubt as to who he was. I am the CEO of Ascend Air. To whom am I speaking? Susan froze. Her jaw dropped. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a ghastly caricature of her earlier smugness. Her eyes, wide with terror, darted to Amani, then back to the phone as if it were a venomous snake. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Maria, standing nearby, looked stunned, but a different emotion dawned on her face, something akin to horrified vindication. I asked a question, Marcus' voice boomed, colder this time. Flight attendant at gate B32, identify yourself. Susan found her voice, though it was a squeak, a pathetic shadow of her earlier arrogance. Susan. Susan Miller, sir. Susan Miller, Marcus repeated, drawing out her name as if etching it into his memory. You are to retrieve Miss Washington's bag from the trash receptacle immediately. You are to inspect it for any damage in her presence and that of your colleague. You are to then apologize to Miss Washington, not a perfunctory apology, Miss Miller, but a sincere one, though frankly, I doubt you have it in you. His voice was laced with controlled fury. Then you are to await further instructions from the head of in-flight services, who will be meeting your flight upon its scheduled arrival or sooner if I can arrange it. You will not be working the flight to New York. Your duties for today are over. In fact, Miss Miller, I strongly suspect your career with Ascend Air is over. Susan was trembling visibly, her face a mask of dawning horror. She looked as though she might collapse. The other passengers lingering at the aircraft door were now openly staring, their curiosity replaced by shocked silence. They had just witnessed a takedown of epic proportions. "Sir, I can explain," Susan stammered, her voice cracking. "There was a misunderstanding. The bag, it was a safety hazard." "A safety hazard?" Marcus' voice was dangerously soft. "My daughter informed me the bag fit the sizer perfectly." "Are you calling my daughter a liar, Miss Miller?" No, sir. Of course not. I overreacted. I'm so sorry, sir. So sorry." Her apology was directed at the phone, at the unseen CEO, not at Amani. "Your apology, Miss Miller, as predicted, is misdirected and meaningless to me," Marcus stated icily. "It is my daughter to whom you owe the apology for your frankly disgusting behavior. Now retrieve her bag immediately." The command from Marcus Washington, delivered with the full weight of his CEO authority, hung in the air, thick and unyielding. Susan Miller, who moments before had been the embodiment of petty tyranny, now looked like a cornered animal. Her face, drained of color, was a canvas of fear and dawning regret. The transformation was stark, and for Amani, a little surreal. Shaking, Susan stumbled toward the trash bin. Her hands, which had so callously tossed Amani's life into the refuse, now hesitated at the rim. It was as if touching the bin, acknowledging her act, was an unbearable humiliation. But the silent, steely pressure from the voice on the phone, and perhaps the glares from the remaining passengers, forced her hand. With a visible grimace, Susan reached into the bin. She pulled out Amani's vibrant backpack, now streaked with coffee stains and grime. A half-eaten banana peel was stuck to one of the straps. The sight sent a fresh wave of nausea and anger through Amani. Her beautiful bag, her personal expression, defiled. Susan held the bag gingerly, as if it were contaminated, and offered it to Amani with a trembling hand. "Here," she mumbled, her eyes downcast, unable to meet Amani's gaze. "Inspect your belongings, Amani," Marcus' voice instructed calmly from the phone. "Maria, please assist her." Maria, who had watched the scene unfold with shock and relief, stepped forward quickly. "Of course, sir, right away." She gently guided Amani to a cleaner spot on the jet bridge floor. "Let's see what we have here, sweetie." Together, they carefully opened the backpack. The first casualty was obvious: Amani's beloved art book, a rare edition gifted by her grandmother. The cover was bent, and a dark coffee stain seeped into the pages. Amani's breath hitched. Her sketchbook had suffered a similar fate, some pages warped and stained. Her new tablet, thankfully in a padded sleeve, seemed physically intact, but Amani wouldn't know for sure until she tried to turn it on. Her sketching pencils, a professional set, were scattered, some tips broken, one snapped in half. Each damaged item felt like a fresh stab. These weren't just things, they were extensions of her, tools for her passion, mementos of love. Susan stood by, wringing her hands, her earlier arrogance completely shattered. She kept muttering, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." But her apologies felt hollow, born of fear rather than genuine remorse. "Miss Miller," Marcus' voice cut through Susan's whimpering. "Have you apologized to my daughter yet?" Susan flinched. She turned to Amani, her face contorted in a desperate attempt at sincerity. "Miss Washington, Amani, I am truly very sorry. I don't know what came over me. It was unprofessional, unacceptable. Please forgive me." Amani looked at Susan, at this woman who, minutes ago, had looked at her with contempt, who had verbally abused her and destroyed her property with racist undertones. Forgiveness felt like a distant, impossible concept. "The damage is done," Amani said quietly, her voice flat. She didn't accept the apology. She couldn't. Not yet. Marcus, still on speaker, seemed to understand. "Maria," he said, his voice slightly softer, "can you please escort Amani onto the aircraft? Find her a comfortable seat, perhaps in first class if there's availability. Ensure she has everything she needs. I want you to personally attend to her for the duration of the flight if she chooses to travel today. Another crew will be needing the aircraft at the gate to take over from Miss Miller." "Yes, Mr. Washington." Absolutely, Maria replied, her voice full of warmth and efficiency. She helped Amani gather her damaged belongings. And Maria, Marcus added, thank you for your decency. It has been noted. Maria blushed slightly. Just doing my job, sir. As Maria helped Amani toward the aircraft door, Susan remained frozen on the jet bridge, the discarded banana peel still clinging to the strap of the now empty trash bin beside her. She looked utterly broken. The other passengers who had witnessed the drama began to board, whispering amongst themselves, casting curious and disdainful glances at Susan. Her career, built over years, had publicly imploded in minutes. The captain of the flight, a stern-looking man with silver hair, had been alerted by the commotion and was now standing at the aircraft door. Maria quickly and discreetly explained the situation to him. The captain's eyes hardened as he listened, his gaze flicking toward Susan on the jet bridge with profound disapproval. He then turned to Amani with a concerned expression. Young lady, I am Captain Evans. On behalf of Ascend Air, I am deeply sorry for what you just experienced. Please come aboard. We'll take care of you. Amani, still shaken but feeling a small measure of vindication, nodded numbly as she stepped onto the aircraft, leaving Susan alone on the jet bridge with the metaphorical and literal wreckage of her actions. She could still hear her father's voice on the phone, now speaking to someone else, presumably his assistant, his tone all business. Get me Henderson from in-flight services on the line now, and then get legal. I want a full review of Susan Miller's employment record and any prior complaints. This isn't just about one incident. This is about the culture we foster here at Ascend Air. The aircraft door closed, sealing Susan Miller's immediate fate on the other side. The drama on the jet bridge was over, but for Susan, the nightmare was just beginning. And for Ascend Air, a reckoning was on the horizon. Once Amani was settled into a spacious first-class seat, a cool glass of water in her hand, and Maria fussing over her with genuine concern, the adrenaline began to subside, replaced by a profound weariness and a lingering sense of violation. The other first-class passengers, mostly business travelers, were discreetly curious but maintained a polite distance. News of the incident on the jet bridge had rippled through the aircraft even before takeoff. Maria had carefully stowed Amani's damaged backpack in an overhead bin, promising to help her document everything for a formal complaint and reimbursement. Though Amani suspected her father would ensure reimbursement was the least of Ascend Air's responses. Before the plane pushed back, a gate agent came on board and had a quiet, urgent word with Captain Evans and Maria. Amani caught snippets, head of in-flight services on his way. Miss Miller is being escorted, formal statement. It was clear her father's directives were being executed with lightning speed. The flight to New York was smooth, but Amani couldn't relax. Her mind replayed Susan's sneering face, her hateful words, the sickening crunch of her belongings being thrown away. Each replay brought fresh waves of anger and humiliation. Maria checked on her frequently, offering snacks, drinks, and comforting words, her kindness a stark contrast to Susan's cruelty. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, Susan Miller was escorted from the jet bridge by airport security and an Ascend Air station manager. She was visibly distraught, tearfully trying to plead her case, but the manager, already briefed by the rapidly escalating chain of command initiated by Marcus Washington, remained impassive. She was taken to a small, sterile office in the airport's operations wing, told to wait, and pointedly informed that she was suspended from duty pending a full investigation. Her ID badge and crew credentials were confiscated. The swiftness of it all left her reeling. Marcus Washington, back at the Ascend Air corporate tower, was a whirlwind of controlled fury. He immediately convened an emergency meeting with his top executives, Sarah Chen, head of in-flight services, David Lee, chief legal officer, and Rebecca Holloway, head of human resources. What happened today on Flight 712 is not just a customer service failure, Marcus began, his voice dangerously calm as he recounted Amani's experience. It is a catastrophic betrayal of our values, an act of blatant racism, and an assault on a child, my child, as it happens, but that fact only serves to bring it to my immediate attention. This could have been anyone's child, any passenger. Sarah Chen, a veteran of the airline industry, looked aghast. Marcus, I am horrified. I've already pulled Susan Miller's file. She's been with us for 12 years. There are a few passenger complaints over the years: rudeness, abruptness, nothing that explicitly screamed racism before, but looking back at them now through this lens, it's possible we missed a pattern.
Possible, Marcus interjected, his eyebrow raised, or convenient to overlook as isolated incidents of a bad day? Rebecca Holloway from HR shifted uncomfortably.
Our review processes are robust, Marcus. But subconscious bias can be difficult to definitively prove without explicit statements or multiple corroborated accounts. Well, we have an explicit account now, David Lee, the legal counsel, stated grimly, and a highly credible witness in Amani, not to mention the other flight attendant, Maria, who witnessed it and, by all accounts, behaved admirably. I want a full, unvarnished investigation into Miller's conduct, not just today, but her entire tenure, Marcus ordered. Pull every passenger comment card, every internal report, every peer review. I want to know if this was an aberration or a pattern we failed to address.
David, what are our immediate options regarding her employment?
Given the severity of the incident, the clear abuse of a passenger, and the potential reputational damage, we have strong grounds for immediate termination for gross misconduct, pending the outcome of a swift, thorough investigation, David replied. The fact that the victim is your daughter will inevitably lead to claims of bias from Miller's side if she fights it, but the core facts of her actions, destroying property, the verbal abuse witnessed by another crew member, are damning enough on their own.
Good, Marcus said.
Sarah, I want you to personally interview Maria, commend her for her actions, and ensure she understands she has the full support of this company.
We need employees like her.
As for Miller, I want a message sent loud and clear: this type of behavior is not just unacceptable, it is anathema to everything Ascend stands for.
We will root it out, and we will be ruthless in doing so.
He paused, his gaze sweeping over his team.
This investigation isn't just about Susan Miller. It's about our culture. Are we truly fostering an environment of respect and inclusivity, or are there pockets of bigotry we've allowed to fester?
I expect honest answers, and I expect them soon. When Amani's flight landed at LaGuardia Airport in New York, she was met at the gate not just by the driver her father had arranged, but also by a senior Ascend Air executive from the New York office, Miss Evans, the regional head of in-flight services.
Miss Evans was professional, deeply apologetic, and efficient.
She had already arranged for a brand new replacement tablet and a gift card to a high-end art supply store, far exceeding the value of Amani's damaged items. Amani, Miss Evans said gently, on behalf of Ascend Air, and personally, I am so profoundly sorry for what you endured today.
There is no excuse for it.
Your father has been in constant contact, and we are taking this with the utmost seriousness.
Amani, tired but appreciative of Miss Evans' sincerity, nodded. Thank you. What will happen to her? Miss Evans hesitated.
There's a formal investigation underway, but I can assure you her actions will have severe consequences. She will not be flying for Ascend Air again. That evening, Susan Miller sat in her lonely Atlanta apartment, the reality of her situation crashing down. Her phone buzzed with calls from her union representative, who sounded grim, and a few nervous colleagues who had heard rumors. She tried to craft a narrative in her head: the girl was rude, the bag was a hazard, it was a stressful day. But the image of Marcus Washington's daughter, the sound of his voice, a CEO's voice promising the end of her career, kept shattering her flimsy justifications. The initial investigation moved with unprecedented speed.
Maria's testimony was crucial.
She recounted Susan's history of cranky behavior, her sharp tongue, and, importantly, a pattern of complaining more frequently about passengers of color, often using coded language.
Other crew members, when interviewed and assured of anonymity and protection from retaliation, began to corroborate.
Stories emerged of Susan making black passengers gate-check perfectly compliant bags while letting white passengers with larger bags pass, of her using a condescending tone primarily with minority travelers, of her muttering disparaging comments under her breath. It was a pattern, all right, a pattern of microaggressions and sometimes overt aggressions that had largely gone unchecked, dismissed as Susan being Susan until she picked the wrong passenger on the wrong day. The days following the incident were a blur of internal reviews, legal consultations, and HR meetings for Ascend Air. For Susan Miller, they were a descent into a personal hell. The initial suspension quickly turned into a formal notification of impending termination, citing gross misconduct, destruction of passenger property, and behavior bringing the company into disrepute. Her union representative, a weary man named Tom Novak, did his best, but the evidence was overwhelming. Maria's detailed statement, corroborated by snippets from other crew members now emboldened by the CEO's personal involvement, painted a damning picture. There was even a blurry cell phone video taken by a lingering passenger on the jet bridge that captured the moment Susan tossed the bag and her aggressive posture toward Amani.
It hadn't gone viral yet, but its existence was another nail in Susan's coffin.
Susan, however, was not one to go down without a fight, or so she thought. Fueled by panic, self-pity, and a refusal to accept her responsibility, she decided on a new tactic: victimhood. She contacted a brash, media-hungry lawyer known for taking on wrongful termination cases with a lot of noise. Together, they concocted a narrative. Susan Miller, a dedicated, long-serving flight attendant, was being made a scapegoat by a powerful CEO to protect his privileged, unruly daughter. They alleged Amani had been verbally abusive first, that her bag was a safety hazard, and that Susan's actions, while perhaps a momentary lapse under stress, were being blown out of proportion. They threatened a lawsuit, alleging defamation and wrongful termination, and hinted at going to the press with a story of corporate bullying. Her lawyer arranged an interview for Susan with a controversial online talk show host known for stoking culture war grievances. On the show, Susan, tearfully recounting her version of events, painted herself as a victim of cancel culture and reverse discrimination. She carefully omitted the racist undertones of her comments to Amani, focusing on the unfairness of a powerful man destroying her life over a minor disagreement with his child. "They're trying to ruin me," Susan lamented to the sympathetic host, dabbing her eyes. 12 years of loyal service, and this is how it ends, because I tried to enforce a safety rule with the CEO's daughter. Is this the world we live in now, where powerful elites can crush the little people? This move was a colossal miscalculation. Marcus Washington and Ascend Air's legal team were prepared. They had meticulously documented everything: Amani's calm testimony, Maria's detailed account of Susan's aggression and racist remarks, "People like you, you're kind," the state of Amani's damaged belongings, and the emerging pattern of prior complaints against Susan that, while previously not definitive, now looked damningly consistent with bias. When Susan's media offensive began, Ascend Air responded not with a war of words, but with cold, hard facts. They issued a carefully worded statement: Ascend Air is committed to providing a safe and respectful environment for all passengers and employees. An incident occurred on Flight 712 involving a now former employee, Miss Susan Miller, whose conduct was found to be in severe violation of company policy, our core values, and basic standards of decency. This included the unwarranted destruction of a passenger's personal property and verbal abuse. A thorough investigation, which included multiple eyewitness accounts and a review of the former employee's service record, confirmed the severity of the misconduct. Ascend Air stands by its decision and will vigorously defend against any baseless claims. We do not tolerate discrimination or abuse in any form. The twist, however, came not just from Ascend Air's corporate response, but from the public itself. Amani, though she had no desire for public attention, had spoken to her father about Susan's racist comments: "People like you, you're kind." While Ascend Air's official statement avoided explicit public accusations of racism to prevent escalating a messy legal battle, the information was part of the internal findings. What Susan hadn't counted on were other victims. Her tearful performance on the talk show, meant to garner sympathy, had the opposite effect on those who had previously encountered her. A black businessman, Dr. Charles Baylor, who flew Ascend Air frequently, saw a clip of the interview. He remembered Susan Miller, her condescending tone, how she'd meticulously scrutinized his family's carry-on luggage a year prior, making them gate-check compliant bags while waving through white passengers with larger items. At the time, he'd been angry but let it go, too tired to file a complaint he felt would go nowhere. Now, seeing her play the victim, he felt indignation. He wrote a detailed post on a popular frequent flyer forum, recounting his experience with Susan Miller and questioning her claims of innocence. His post was measured, factual, and resonated with others. Soon, more stories surfaced online. A Latina woman shared how Susan had mocked her accent. An Asian couple described being rudely dismissed when they asked for assistance. None of these incidents in isolation had triggered major disciplinary action, often lost in the sea of daily airline operations. But together, they formed a clear, undeniable pattern that corroborated Maria's testimony and Amani's experience. The passenger who had taken the cell phone video, a quiet college student named Kevin, saw Susan's interview and felt disgusted by her dishonesty. He hadn't known who Amani was, only that he'd witnessed an injustice. He uploaded his video to YouTube, not for clicks, but for truth. Titled "Flight Attendant Trashes Girl's Bag Raw Footage," the blurry but clear enough video showed Susan's aggressive action, Amani's distress, and the bag disappearing into the bin. It directly contradicted Susan's tearful, sanitized version of events. The video started to gain traction, shared across social media platforms. It was the visual proof that shattered Susan's facade of victimhood. Susan Miller's attempt to reframe herself as a martyr backfired spectacularly. The online testimonials from other passengers who had suffered her prejudiced behavior, coupled with the undeniable visual evidence of Kevin's video, painted a picture of a woman who wasn't a victim of circumstance, but a perpetrator of repeated misconduct. Her media offensive crumbled. The controversial talk show host quietly distanced himself, removing the interview from his archives as public sentiment turned against her. Her lawyer, realizing Susan had been less than forthcoming about her behavior, grew frustrated. The threatened lawsuit against Ascend began to look less viable and more like a fast track to professional embarrassment. He advised Susan to drop the suit and disappear from the public eye, but the damage was done. Ascend legal team, armed with the growing dossier of complaints and the viral video, felt no need to settle. They stood by their findings and decision. The hard karma for Susan Miller wasn't just the loss of her job at Ascend Air, it was the comprehensive dismantling of her career and public image. The airline industry, while large, is interconnected, especially within the flight attendant community. News of the incident, the CEO's involvement, and Susan's disastrous media campaign spread like wildfire. The video of her throwing the bag became infamous. Other airlines, even regional carriers, became wary. Background checks and reference requests would lead back to Ascend Air, and while companies are careful about what they say, the circumstances of her departure were a massive red flag. No airline wanted to hire a flight attendant who was now the public face of unprofessional conduct and alleged racism, especially one who had mishandled a situation so badly it reached the CEO and went viral. Her flight attendant wings were effectively clipped permanently. Her wrongful termination suit, as predicted by her reluctant lawyer, was dead on arrival. Ascend Air had followed due process meticulously. The evidence of her misconduct was overwhelming. Her lawyer dropped her as a client when she refused to accept the futility of her case and continued to insist she was the wronged party, even against the mountain of evidence. She was left with significant legal bills and no recourse. The internet had a long memory. While the initial furor died down, searching Susan's name online would forever bring up news articles, forum discussions, and the video. She became a minor internet villain, a cautionary tale. Locally in Atlanta, people recognized her. Whispers followed her in the grocery store. Former colleagues, even those once friendly, avoided her. The shame was a constant, gnawing companion. Without a job and with her industry prospects decimated, Susan faced severe financial hardship. The lifestyle she'd been accustomed to, funded by 12 years of steady employment as a flight attendant with good benefits, crumbled. She had to downsize her apartment, sell her car, and struggle to find employment that paid a comparable wage. Her skills were specific to an industry that no longer wanted her, and her notoriety made even general customer service jobs difficult to obtain. Potential employers would Google her name, see the stories, and quietly choose other candidates. The hard karma was the slow, grinding realization that her actions had irrevocably destroyed her professional life and future security. Perhaps the most profound karma was internal. While Susan tried to externalize blame, the weight of public condemnation, the irrefutable evidence of her own behavior captured on video, and the chorus of past victims forced some level of introspection, however unwelcome. The confident, dismissive sneer she had worn so easily was replaced by the haunted look of someone who has seen their worst self reflected back by the entire world and can no longer deny it. She had prided herself on her authority, her control. Now she had none. Her life was no longer her own, overshadowed by one catastrophic, hate-fueled decision. Amani, shielded by her family and focusing on her art program,
was largely insulated from the public fallout of Susan's implosion. Her father ensured she knew justice was being served, not just for her, but for the principle of respect and dignity that Susan had violated. He was more concerned with systemic changes within Ascend Air than reveling in Susan's downfall, though he made no secret of his satisfaction that her actions had met appropriate consequences. The pilot, Captain Evans, and Maria, the kind flight attendant, were both formally commended by Ascend Air. Maria received a special citation for her courage and integrity. She became an internal champion for improved customer service training, focusing on de-escalation and cultural sensitivity. Kevin, the student who posted the video, received a thank you note from Marcus Washington himself, along with a generous travel voucher. Though Kevin insisted he didn't want a reward, he was just glad to help expose the truth. Susan Miller's career didn't just end, it was obliterated by her own hand, a hard lesson in how quickly prejudice and cruelty can unravel a life. The universe, sometimes with a little help from a determined CEO and the digital eyes of the public, has a way of ensuring that karma isn't just a concept, but a palpable force. The Susan Miller incident sent shockwaves through Ascend Air, far beyond the immediate disciplinary action. For Marcus Washington, it was a harsh spotlight on potential systemic failings he was now determined to address. His daughter's traumatic experience had personalized the issue, but his responsibility as CEO was to ensure such an event was an aberration, not a symptom of a deeper malaise within the company culture. In the weeks and months that followed, Marcus spearheaded a comprehensive review of Ascend Air's policies, training programs, and complaint handling procedures. He didn't just want to punish one errant employee, he wanted to transform the airline. This isn't just about firing one person, Marcus declared in a company-wide town hall streamed to employees across the globe. This is about who we are and who we aspire to be. Ascend must be a place where every single passenger and every single employee feels respected, valued, and safe. Prejudice in any form has no altitude here. It will not be tolerated. Period. Several key initiatives were launched. Enhanced training, mandatory diversity, equity, and inclusion training was revamped and rolled out for all employees, from gate agents to pilots, baggage handlers to executives. This wasn't a checkbox exercise. It involved interactive workshops, real-life scenarios, including anonymized elements of Amani's experience, and modules on unconscious bias and de-escalation techniques tailored to customer-facing roles. Maria was invited to share her perspective in developing these modules, focusing on proactive intervention and support for colleagues and passengers. Complaint system overhaul. The system for lodging and investigating complaints was made more transparent, accessible, and robust. An independent ombudsman office was established to review sensitive cases, ensuring impartiality. Marcus insisted on a no-retaliation policy for those who reported misconduct, a policy communicated widely and enforced strictly. They also implemented better tracking of complaints to identify patterns of behavior before they escalated to the level of the Susan Miller incident. Cultural audit. An external firm was brought in to conduct a cultural audit, identifying areas where inclusivity could be improved and where biases might still exist, however subtly. The results were sobering, revealing that while overt incidents like Susan's were rare, microaggressions and a lack of diverse representation in some leadership roles were issues that needed addressing. Employee support and empowerment. New channels were created for employees to voice concerns and report problematic behavior among colleagues without fear. The message was clear: creating a respectful environment was everyone's responsibility. Employees like Maria were celebrated as examples of the company's values in action. For Amani, the experience was a harsh awakening. She was a naturally resilient and optimistic young woman, but the incident had undeniably shaken her. Her art became an outlet. She filled her sketchbook not just with beautiful landscapes or portraits, but with abstract pieces exploring themes of injustice, resilience, and voice. The damaged art book from her grandmother, though carefully restored by a professional, remained a poignant reminder. She chose not to get a new one, the repaired one told a story. She found the summer art program in New York to be a healing experience. Surrounded by creativity and diverse perspectives, she began to process what had happened. She talked about it with her father, not with anger anymore, but with a thoughtful curiosity about how such prejudice could exist and what could be done to fight it. Marcus, for his part, learned from his daughter's quiet strength and thoughtful questions.
He realized that being a CEO wasn't just about profit margins and fleet expansion, it was about the people, the passengers who trusted Ascend Air with their journeys, and the employees who represented the airline to the world. He became a more vocal advocate for DEI initiatives within the broader aviation industry, sharing Ascend Air's reformed practices at conferences and industry gatherings. The story of Susan Miller became a cautionary tale within Ascend Air, but it also became a catalyst for positive change. The airline didn't sweep the incident under the rug, they confronted it, learned from it, and took decisive steps to improve. It wasn't a perfect transformation overnight, but it was a genuine, committed effort.
Amani continued to fly Ascend Air.
Her first few flights were nerve-wracking, but she noticed a subtle shift.
Flight attendants seemed more attentive, more consciously courteous.
She knew it wasn't just because of her or her father, it was because the entire airline was on a new trajectory, one aimed at a higher standard of service and respect. She never forgot Susan Miller, not the name, nor the face, nor the hateful words. But she refused to let that woman's bitterness define her or diminish her own light. Amani Washington had her art, her dreams, and a father who not only moved mountains for her, but was also trying to change the landscape of the entire mountain range. Her backpack, still bearing faint scars from its ordeal but also new, defiant painted designs, became a symbol of her journey, a reminder that even when faced with ugliness, one could still create beauty, find strength, and, with the right support, ensure that justice and decency ultimately took flight. The real name subtly woven in was Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, ATL, a real, major airport grounding the stories beginning in a familiar setting. The rest, like Ascend Air, was fictional to serve the narrative. And there you have it, Dark Stories fans, a shocking abuse of power met with swift, decisive justice. Susan Miller's career didn't just end, it crashed and burned because of her own hateful actions. Amani's call to her CEO father didn't just save her vacation, it exposed a problem and sparked real change within Ascend Air, reminding us that one voice, especially when backed by the courage to speak up, can make a monumental difference.
What do you think about Susan's karma? Was it deserved? Have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it.
If this story resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to Dark Stories and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into dramatic tales of justice and karma.
Thanks for watching.